The spring sun gleamed over the immaculate brick buildings of Windsor Heights Academy, one of Boston's most elite private schools. The lawns were freshly cut, the banners fluttering in school colors, and the scent of lilies and fresh pastries drifted from the decorated gymnasium where the annual Legacy Luncheon was about to begin. Cars lined the front entrance, some sleek and black with tinted windows, others driven by chauffeurs in pressed uniforms. Inside the gates, excitement buzzed among the students. This was the event of the year. 11-year-old Vivian Brady stepped out of her mother's Tesla, wearing a pastel blue dress that danced in the wind. Her blonde hair was braided tightly, her shoes polished to a shine. Her heart thumped not with nerves but anticipation. This was her first year being eligible for the Legacy Luncheon, a ceremony honoring students with meaningful family lineage. She clutched her invitation card and approached the registration table. The woman sitting behind it, an older administrator with glasses hanging from a chain around her neck, looked up and smiled politely. "Name?" she asked. "Vivian Lake," Vivian replied, using the name on her school records. The woman checked her list, scanned it again, then frowned. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. You're not on the legacy list." Vivian blinked. "There must be a mistake. My dad is Tom Brady." The woman gave a strained smile. "Yes, we've heard. But that's not the kind of legacy we consider for this event. Athletes and entertainers don't qualify under our historical or academic criteria." Other students began to gather behind Vivian, watching. Some were her classmates. A few whispered. One of them, Charlotte Winslow, smirked and walked past her into the gym. "Guess fame doesn't count," she said under her breath. Vivian's cheeks burned. She felt her chest tighten as the administrator gently guided her away from the entrance. "You can wait outside until dismissal," she said, already turning to the next name on the list. Vivian stood frozen. Her dress suddenly felt too tight, her polished shoes too heavy. Everything around her seemed to dim. She stepped aside, pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, and called her dad. "Hey, sweetheart." Tom Brady's voice came through, warm and cheerful. "How's the luncheon?" She tried to speak, but the words came out as sobs. "They didn't let me in." He paused. "What? Why not?" "They said, I'm not a real legacy. They said your name doesn't count." There was a long silence on the line. "I'm coming," he said quietly. Before we dive deeper into this story of heartbreak, fame, and defiance, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true stories that move and inspire. Tom Brady had been called many things in his life: champion, icon, even the GOAT. But in that moment, all he felt was helplessness. His daughter had been dismissed, not because she lacked worth, but because someone had decided her father's impact didn't fit into a narrow frame. Meanwhile, back at school, Vivian sat alone on a bench near the parking lot. She didn't cry anymore, not visibly anyway. She stared ahead at the road, her fingers clutching the wrinkled invitation she was told didn't matter. And deep inside, a small fire began to spark. One not fueled by fame or pride, but by something stronger: the need to be seen, the right to belong. The following morning, the Windsor Heights campus buzzed with post-event chatter. Pictures of the Legacy Luncheon flooded social media, golden name tags, tables adorned with white roses, and students beaming beside their proud parents. But there was no trace of Vivian. She had walked away unnoticed, unacknowledged, except for a few whispered laughs from her peers and a silence that felt louder than any insult. Inside the Brady household, the atmosphere was starkly different. Tom sat at the kitchen counter, the phone on speaker as he replayed the conversation he'd had the night before with the school's front office. "So to clarify," he said calmly, "you're saying my daughter was excluded based on a policy that defines legacy by academic or institutional lineage only?" The woman on the line sounded uncomfortable. "Yes, Mr. Brady, it's a long-standing tradition here, going back decades." "Right. And that doesn't include contributions to society, philanthropy, or cultural impact?" A pause. "That's correct. It's not a judgment of value, just a specific definition." He thanked her and hung up. Giselle leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching him. "We could go public with this. It would explode in the press in 10 minutes. Tom shook his head. "That's not what Vivian needs. She doesn't want this to be about me. She wanted to feel included for her own reasons. If we turn it into a scandal, she loses that chance." Giselle's eyes softened. "So what do you want to do?" Tom looked down at his hands. "I'm going to ask them to listen, not to me as a name, but as a father." At school, Vivian kept her head low as she walked through the hallways. Whispers followed her, some curious, some cruel. Charlotte passed by again, grinning smugly. "Maybe next year they'll host a sports day. You could try out for that." Vivian didn't answer. She clutched her books tighter and kept walking. Her teacher, Ms. Connolly, noticed. After class, she approached Vivian gently. "You okay, sweetie?" Vivian hesitated, then nodded, her voice a whisper. "I just wanted to be part of something, not because of my dad, just for me. Ms." Connolly knelt to meet her eyes. "Sometimes people forget that greatness isn't always inherited the way they think. Sometimes it's about what you carry forward." That afternoon, a formal email arrived at the school office, a request from Tom Brady to speak directly with the Board of Governors. Not as a celebrity, not with press, just as a parent. The board was hesitant. Some members worried it would draw attention. Others argued he had a point worth hearing. Ultimately, the head of the board, Mr. Aldridge, agreed. "Let him speak, but let's be clear, this policy isn't about status." Tom arrived the next day in a simple navy suit. No entourage, no cameras. He shook hands with each board member and took a seat at the long mahogany table. The room was quiet as he began. "I'm not here to ask for exceptions," he said. "I'm here to ask you to think differently about what a legacy truly is." He described Vivian, her heart, her hard work, her desire to belong without leaning on his name. He spoke of the children he'd met over the years, whose lives were changed by football camps, hospital visits, charity foundations. "You define legacy by the past," he said, "but kids like Vivian, they're trying to build a future." Several board members looked away, uncomfortable. Others leaned in, listening closely, and as Tom sat back, hands folded, he knew this wasn't just about one school policy. It was about what kind of world his daughter and every child would inherit. Tom Brady's words lingered in the boardroom like the final seconds of a fourth quarter, quiet, heavy, full of tension. Mr. Aldridge cleared his throat first. "Mr. Brady, we appreciate your perspective, truly, but this school has upheld its heritage criteria for over 80 years. Changing that could invite complications." Tom nodded slowly. "I understand tradition. I spent 2 decades in a league built on it, but even the NFL had to change when it became clear that the old rules no longer fit the new game." Another board member, Dr. Marissa Levin, raised her hand. "I teach American history here, and if I may, legacies are not static, they evolve. We've seen that in civil rights, in education access, in gender equity. Why should our school be different?" A murmur rippled through the room. One of the older governors scoffed quietly. "Let's not pretend this is about principles. This is about Mr. Brady wanting his daughter to be treated like royalty." Tom looked him straight in the eye. "I want her to be treated like she matters." Silence fell. Tom stood. "I'm not asking you to create a category for famous people. I'm asking you to consider a broader definition of contribution, one that includes service, inspiration, and influence. Isn't that what we tell our students to strive for?" Outside the boardroom, news of the meeting spread through staff like wildfire. Though the school had avoided press, whispers circulated among faculty and parents. Some admired Tom's courage. Others feared the changes it might bring, but most agreed on one thing. The conversation was overdue. Meanwhile, Vivian walked home slower than usual that day. She'd heard from Ms. Connolly that her dad had spoken to the board, but she didn't know the details, and a part of her wasn't sure she wanted to. What if nothing changed? She reached her room and tossed her backpack on the floor. The invitation that had caused it all still lay crumpled on her dresser. She picked it up, stared at the elegant gold letters, and for the first time, let her anger rise to the surface. She didn't want pity. She didn't want special treatment, but she wanted fairness. That evening, Tom came home and found her in the backyard, sitting under the oak tree with their dog Lua curled beside her. "They listened," he said gently, sitting next to her. Vivian didn't look up. Did they care? He smiled faintly. Some did. Some still don't. But that's how change works, one conversation at a time. She sighed. Even if they fix the rules, it doesn't change how they see me. Tom turned to her. You're right. That part, you'll have to change yourself. Vivian met his eyes. How? By standing in front of them, speaking, showing them what a real legacy looks like. The next morning, Vivian opened her locker to find a cream-colored envelope with her name in gold script. Inside was a new invitation, not to attend the next legacy luncheon, but to speak at it. The school had agreed to host a special edition of the event called Legacy in Action, showcasing students who had made a meaningful impact, regardless of their family name. Vivian's hands trembled as she read it. Her name was listed first. She wasn't ready, but she would be. The day of the Legacy in Action luncheon arrived with the same ceremonial elegance as before. Linen-draped tables, a string quartet near the entrance, trays of sparkling apple cider passed by gloved waiters. But this time, something was different. The student body had been told that this event would redefine how the school recognized greatness. And at the heart of it all stood an 11-year-old girl with trembling hands and a voice that refused to crack. Vivian Brady stood behind the stage curtain in the gymnasium, holding the note cards she'd rewritten a dozen times. Her dress was simple, her hair pulled back, but her eyes carried the weight of something far older than her age. She thought about the nights she spent lying awake, wondering why her name, something she didn't choose, seemed to overshadow everything she tried to be. In the crowd sat teachers, parents, and the entire school board. Even the administrator, who once turned her away, now waited in the front row, hands folded, eyes lowered. Tom had offered to be there. So had Giselle. But Vivian had asked them not to come. I need to do this by myself, she'd said. When the MC called her name, a hush fell over the room. Vivian stepped onto the stage, her small frame barely visible behind the podium. She looked out over the crowd, not at faces but at the silence. That was the scariest part. The moment before a word, where you could still choose to run. But she didn't. Hi, she began. Her voice was soft but clear. My name is Vivian Brady. I'm a 6th grader here. And until 2 weeks ago, I thought legacy was something I didn't have. She paused, breath steady. I was wrong. Legacy isn't about who your great-grandfather was. It's about what you do with what you've been given, whether that's a famous last name or a quiet voice. It's about how you make people feel. It's about kindness when no one's watching, standing up when it's uncomfortable, and refusing to let other people tell you what you're worth. The room remained still. Every ear listened. She held up the original invitation card, now laminated. This is the invitation I was told I didn't deserve. I'm keeping it, not as a reminder of being excluded, but of what happens when you speak up. A student in the back clapped once, then another. Soon, the entire room erupted in applause. Even Charlotte Winslow stood, her face red, clapping with reluctant respect. Ms. Connolly wiped a tear from her cheek. Vivian stepped back from the podium, heart pounding, but no longer from fear. For the first time in her life, she wasn't Tom Brady's daughter. She was Vivian, and they saw her. Behind the stage, a school board member caught up with her. That was extraordinary, he said, stunned. Would you mind if we included your speech in the school's admissions video? Vivian blinked. Sure, I guess. And we'd like to talk to your father again, he added, about a scholarship program. Something named after your family, but not for sports, for courage. Vivian smiled. I'll ask him. That evening, Tom sat on the porch when she got home, sipping tea. Well? He asked. She dropped a copy of her speech in his lap. He read it slowly, then looked up at her with eyes filled with awe. You didn't just make your mark, he whispered. I who changed the rules. Vivian shrugged, half smiling. Guess I inherited something after all. The weeks that followed felt like waking up in a different world, not louder, not easier, but clearer. At Windsor Heights Academy, the administration rolled out an updated legacy program policy. It now included a new category, impact-based contribution, meant to recognize students who demonstrated personal influence, community service, or meaningful inspiration. The announcement was made during a school assembly, and for the first time in years, the auditorium erupted in spontaneous applause. Vivian's speech was featured in the school's digital welcome video, shown to all new families during admissions. Her laminated invitation card was framed and hung in the hallway near the administration office, beside a brass plaque inscribed, "Legacy is not inherited, it is created." Vivian walked through the halls with a quiet confidence. The students who once whispered about her now nodded in recognition, not because of her last name, but because she had stood on that stage and said what they all felt, but didn't know how to express. Even Charlotte Winslow changed. Not completely, but enough. One afternoon in the library, she slid a note across the table during group study. That speech was brave. I didn't get it before. I do now. Vivian looked up. Charlotte offered a brief, sheepish smile. No words needed. At home, Tom Brady watched his daughter grow into herself with a pride deeper than any championship ring could represent. He'd won Super Bowls, stood on victory podiums, delivered speeches before millions, but none of it compared to the moment he saw Vivian, alone, steady, facing the world on her own terms. One morning, Giselle joined him at breakfast, scrolling through her phone. The foundation team called. They want to name the new youth leadership grant after Vivian. Tom raised an eyebrow. What did she say? Giselle grinned. She asked if they could make it anonymous. He chuckled. That's my girl. On the last day of the semester, Windsor Heights held a new tradition, the Founders Forward Assembly, designed to celebrate modern contributions to the school's evolving identity. Students nominated one of their own for the Legacy in Action Award. Vivian didn't expect to win. She hadn't campaigned, hadn't asked. But when the MC opened the envelope and read her name, the entire gym stood in unison. This time she didn't hesitate. She walked to the stage, her posture calm and her voice clear. Thank you, she said simply. I hope this means the next person who feels invisible won't have to speak quite so loud to be seen. At the ceremony's close, Tom and Giselle waited for her outside. Vivian ran into their arms, laughing. I did it, she said softly. No, Tom replied, holding her tight. You became it. As they drove home, the sun dipped low, casting warm light over the city skyline. Vivian leaned her head against the window, a quiet smile playing at her lips. She wasn't trying to escape her name anymore. She had grown into it, not as its shadow, but as its evolution. And somewhere inside she knew, this was just the beginning. If this story moved you, subscribe for more moments where the quietest voices become the loudest in the room. And don't forget to click on the next story waiting for you, one that will make your heart beat just as fast.